This morning we're about to have an excellent session with four very informed and experienced speakers on making the joint imperative work. Obviously, joint warfare is a key basis for our approach to military operations these days. It's an essential foundation for how we think about the use of force, and obviously it has a direct impact on capability development issues, military strategy, and obviously the broader defence enterprise, including defence budgeting. So it's a vital topic, and it's going to be with us from here on in into the future in terms of how we fight wars, in particular the joint application of force together with coalition operations and interoperability. So this morning I'm not going to talk too much about this because we are running behind time, so I just want to introduce our speakers. First up we have Rear Admiral Mead. He joined the Royal Australian Navy in 1984 and he's the head of Navy capability. He has extensive experience in the Middle East, including in the area of Middle East area of operations, including as commander of Combined Task Force 150. He was the defence advisor to India and Sri Lanka and South Africa, and in 2005 he was the CEO of HMAS Parramatta, which took part in Op Catalyst. Then we have Air Vice-Marshal Warren McDonald. He's the Deputy Chief of Air Force from July 2015, and before that he was Australian Component Commander for Joint Task Force 633 in support of Operation Slipper. He has extensive operational flying experience with AP3C Orions. Next, Rear Admiral Peter Quinn, who's the Head Joint Capability Coordinator. He was previously DG Navy Capability Transition and Sustainment, where he was responsible for transitioning Navy capabilities in the service, including the LHDs, Air Warfare Destroyers, and the SH-60R Romeos. He was CEO of HMAS Sydney from 2003 to 2006, which saw Sydney undergo significant and extensive upgrades. And he was awarded the Conspicuous Service Cross for his role as the CEO of Sydney. Finally, we have Major General Sengelman. He's the head of Special Ops in Australia. His bio is rather brief, but that seems to be appropriate for a Special Ops person. So all I can say is he has seen extensive service. But let's start with Rear Admiral Mead. Thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm. On behalf of the fellow members of this panel, I do need to thank Peter and ASPI for inviting us and holding this conference. As a military member, I've got to be honest, you can't help but be excited about the white paper and about what it is delivering. All four of us were involved in the crafting, the formulating and injecting and the guiding and the amendments throughout 14, 15 and 16. And I do tell people that I'm so excited by the white paper that I now dress all in white as an exhibit of my appreciation for what government delivered. 76 years ago today, and I know there are some very esteemed maritime historians sitting right in front of me, on the 8th of April 1940, a British aircraft carrier, the Glorious, was patrolling the North Sea. It unfortunately encountered two German battleships. The battle was brief and Glorious was ingloriously sunk to the bottom of the North Sea with a loss of 1,200 lives. And it really was, when you read the history of that, it was an embarrassing failure on behalf of the British, and the core was this joint effect which did not exist at that time and enabled that carrier to stumble into the German battle fleet. So when I looked at what we were meant to talk to today, I wanted to look at the history of previous white papers from a joint perspective, and I went back to 40 years ago, 1976, and you'll see if you read that there are 12 references to joint. When you go to the 1987, the milestone one with Professor Dibb and Kim Beazley to my left here, there are 24 references to jointry. The 2000 white paper opens with a stanza that talks about the development of an integrated and balanced joint force. In 2009 there were 56 references, and in the latest white paper, you can see where this is going. If you include the DIP as well, there are 125 references to the joint domain. And so this concept of joint is obviously not a new one and has been around for many decades, and is something that the ADF has been working towards. At times we have struggled, but it has clearly been in the foremost of government and also military planners' minds for 4 decades now. If I could then take us back to what the Minister said yesterday morning, and when she made her opening speech, and she spoke about the importance of industry. And why I raise that point is that most people, when they talk about joint, instantly revert back to Navy, Army and Air Force and the ability to work together. And that is clear. I mean, we've had that mindset for decades and we understand that and we're working on it. But there's another aspect to this, and it is the people in this audience and who they represent. And that is what the Minister said, is that industry has a key role in the development of, or the delivery of the white paper and in the capability, and as now as a FIC in its own right. And in my mind, industry has a key role in the delivery of the joint imperative, and that is for industry and companies to understand how their product can deliver an effect not just for an individual domain, whether it be Navy, Army, Air Force, in the maritime area, but how that could be extrapolated out for the joint effect. And I'm not too sure whether I've seen much narrative or conversation on that at the moment. We always instantly revert to the military members, and of course here we have 4 military members here from each one of the services, and it's almost, when we talk about the joint imperative, it's code for criticism of the ADF and not being able to work together. I don't intend to dwell on too many key points. I did have some notes about in the maritime space where jointry is fundamental for us in the future. Theatre ASW is a concept that we're working on at the moment. That clearly has to be done across not just the services, but the other groups and agencies in defence and other agencies outside the department. Integrated air and missile defence, working with the capabilities that Air Force is developing with the air warfare destroyer, and also in the amphibious area, ourselves and Army and Air Force in developing that balanced and integrated force as we go forward. But I won't dwell on that because my colleagues here to my left will probably talk on that. All that I would say about the white paper is ask not what the white paper can do for you, but what you can do for the white paper. And I'll now hand over to my Air Force colleague.
Sir. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you as well, Malcolm. Right, I don't know how I'm going to make the analogy of the colour of my uniform to the white paper. However, what I would say that with the white paper and the 2 supporting documents that come with it, obviously the Integrated Investment Program and the Industry Statement, 3 seminal documents that do bring together joint by design. And that is important. And as Jonathan has articulated, over the years we've been more and more discussing the joint focus. I can say to you all in the audience with great confidence that we do all get on, although as a family sometimes there are tensions, and those tensions in the past haven't always been to the benefit of all. We have made a pact between ourselves to be more joint and more focused, and look at each other and support each other as we go forward, as any family would. We meet very regularly. We do discuss the seams in between our capabilities to make sure they are corrected and addressed. Peter Quinn, who will talk very soon, has been very good in bringing us together in that point, and will, as the VCDF group in the joint and as the strategic centre become stronger, we'll bring that together in a more sharper focus. What I would say though, with some of the capabilities that we do bring inside defence, they do require for us to look very closely at how they dovetail in. And it's not always easy. We can talk joint, we can talk integration, but it's not simple. It never has been, and it won't be in the future as well. And the reason for that is where we take our capabilities from, they're necessarily, or by design, somewhat larger forces. If you look at Air Force, we do lean quite heavily into United States Air Force's capabilities, and also into United States Navy's capabilities. They are large enough to have 2 very separate identities and 2 very strong focus. One will be air superiority and obviously maritime operations. So when you bring in capabilities that we require. That's the reason you see Defence now, or Air Force, trying to get into the ground level of those through cooperative development programs. A good example would be P8 and Triton. P8 because we needed air-sea rescue kits, which the United States Navy doesn't have to worry about. It may take them on as a result of us looking at it, but they have a Coast Guard. They have a lot of other arms that can deliver those capabilities. But for us, it's very important in an Australian geographical context. Then if you look at the Triton, for Navy, the Triton was to look at the large surface picture and get ahead of the fleet, looking at the bigger capabilities that may go against them. Well, our focus is on small target detection, because government priorities require us to be able to do that to the north of Australia. So that's why we get into those programs at a cooperative development level, so that we can influence the outcomes and then becomes joint by design when it enters service into Australia. They're sort of key points to remember, because we don't have those type of larger industries inside Australia so that we can influence right up front. We do have to go and shop outside of Australia, but we do also look for inserting Australian content more and more. And we do need your assistance, for those industry members in the audience, to instruct us or educate us on where you sit best and how we can best play your part when we're in those cooperative programs. For Air Force, when we look at and we look at the joint piece, we look through three lenses. For Air Force, it's up through the E7, and it's very true of Air Force people to become platform focused. But it's important because the E7, the AWACS, is the key piece inside Air Force for connectivity and understanding and transmission of data. Then I look to Navy and I look at the air warfare destroyer that will be soon delivered. And then for Army, it's the battle management system. And as a trio, we need to work together and make sure those three systems are very well linked and very well understood of the networks required to support it, because sitting right underneath it is a soldier, sailor and airman that will depend upon those links to make sure that the right information is transmitted to them at the right time. And without looking through those lenses, we run the risk of separating, not by intent, but by nature of design or blindness. So that is where we're focusing in Air Force. And to get a better understanding of that, you may have already heard of Plan Jericho. That's where we go and test those areas to make sure we're on the right path. We recently did an air-land demonstration. That was done to test what are the links we're missing so that we can better provide Army with the information they need. Because we haven't, and it might come to some surprise in the audience, done that on a regular basis. That's been a mistake, and that's something we are correcting by working very closely with Army to ensure we understand clearly what they need and we can provide it when they need it. And same now, we are now turning to Navy to become better partners inside the maritime operations, ASW theatre operations, maritime strike, so that we can drive now those requirements inside our equipment to provide that joint effect. What it really all comes down to, if you want to sit back and look at it all in a larger context, is leadership. And we have exceptional leadership at the top inside Defence. And if you extend that back to government as well, they're providing the leadership to allow us to get on with the job. You look at CDF and Secretary, very focused on making sure the joint imperative works. And then you look at the three leaders in the three separate services, and also in our public service sector inside Defence. They are very focused on it. And I would say that the movement towards a more joint focus has allowed us to blend together very effectively as a family. Thank you.
Peter?
Thanks, Warren. Malcolm, Jonathan mentioned the number of references to joint in the white paper, integrated investment plan, and DIPS, 120 or so. I think when you look closely at the white paper and the integrated investment plan in particular, it goes a lot deeper than just the references. It goes to funding the joint capabilities of the future. And if we combine the white paper, integrated investment plan with the first principles review, you actually end up with a package of things which will actually deliver a much more integrated joint force. When I look at the integrated investment program in particular, it's split into 6 capability streams. I think it's quite significant that 2 of those investment streams are C4I, SREW, space and cyber, key joint enabling capabilities, and also the joint enablers stream. So when I look at both of those, I look at inside the C4I, SREW stream, we've got a number of programs there for modernising our intelligence systems, enhanced situational awareness, imagery analysis, a lot in the way of new ISR capabilities, including the new Triton that Warren has talked about, long-range electronic warfare aircraft, new C4IR systems, and cyber capabilities. Inside the key enablers stream, a lot of investment in new training ranges, testing facilities, which will really be required for our new joint 5th generation capabilities. Significant investments in simulation capabilities and a really big investment all the way through in our ICT, from everything from supporting the core business functions up to the high-end warfighting capabilities. But to really get the full picture of the full scope of the investment in joint capabilities, you need to look into the other streams as well. Jonathan's mentioned one of them. Inside the strike and air combat stream is the Joint Integrated Air and Missile Defence System. That is a very big investment. It spans a long period of time. It spans a lot of capabilities from within Australia, deployed capabilities. That will be a truly joint capability right from the start, right through to the later phases that are delivered. Of course, putting all these things in the integrated investment plan and white paper is great, but they need to be delivered. And the delivery of this new, more integrated joint force will actually be through the reforms of the first principles review. I'll just touch on some of the key reforms in the FPR related to the joint force. The Vice Chief has been confirmed as the Deputy to the Chief of Defence Force, and VCF has been made explicitly the Joint Capability Authority, who's responsible for joint force integration, interoperability and designing the future force. VCDF's been put in charge of the money. He is the chair of the new Defence Investment Committee, which is looking not just at delivering what we previously had as DCP projects, but all future investments, including ICT, estate and enablers. The responsibility for setting joint requirements has been transferred to the Vice Chief of Defence Force, as has the setting of requirements has been transferred to the other capability managers for their domains, but the Vice Chief has got the setting of requirements for the core joint capabilities. The establishment of a permanent force design function within VCDF Group, which will effectively continue to revise the force structure in a systematic way, which will probably mean we won't need to do another force structure review when we do our next white paper. VCDF has been designated as the C4ISR Design Authority for the ADF, responsible for defining the warfighting environment, the architecture and setting the military interoperability requirements for the whole force. VCF's decision rights, I'm saying VCF a lot here, his decision rights have been greatly strengthened, including he has essentially a red card to stop any project proceeding through the investment proposal that does not meet the joint force integration requirements. And finally, the establishment of a new end-to-end capability life cycle, which will maximise the delivery of our new capabilities. So VCDF has been responsible for designing this new life cycle. It's something we've been working on for the past 12 months. Indeed, the two people to my right here have been on a steering group as we've designed that in a truly joint way over the last 12 months. We just finished the design actually only last month, and the new life cycle was actually established last Friday. The 5 key tenets of that new life cycle are: we've got strategy-led decision-making in the strongest strategic centre in defence. We've got an arm's-length contestability function built in across all of the phases of the life cycle, which is aimed to improve our decision-making and our quality of advice to government. We've got the enduring strategic-led force design process I mentioned. We've got comprehensive governance and management of the integrated investment plan within the Vice Chief of Defence Force Group. And core to actually delivering the new capability life cycle will be the new smart buyer construct that we've built into the new capability. And the core component of the new smart buyer is that we are going to take a risk-based, tailored approach to delivering new capabilities. So if it's a simple procurement, we will follow a simple process and produce simple documentation. If it's a complex investment, like a future submarine, we will take a more deliberate approach based on the risks of that particular investment. So just finally, obviously, even the reforms don't mean much unless you actually put the organisation in place and you resource the organisation to deliver the reforms. And as of last Friday, within VCDF Group, we've stood up 2 new divisions. The Force Design Division underneath Air Vice-Marshal Mel Hupfield, and in my division. So my title has changed as of Friday. I'm now the new Head of Joint Capability Management and Integration. So force design, we've pulled together a number of different areas into the Force Design Division. It won't just do the traditional FSR process. It will be involved in developing our core joint concepts and testing them, importantly. We've brought doctrine into that area as well. That group will be the centre of excellence for testing, evaluation, wargaming, experimenting with the new force designs, and actually delivering it. How new capability proposals actually enter the integrated investment plan will be through force design. All projects, the traditional DCP projects, will go through that process. And we've got my new division. I've got a few roles. Firstly, I'm now a joint capability manager for some of the key joint glue projects, things such as ISREW, joint C2 systems, joint force cyber, simulation, joint fires, and Category 1 training areas, to name a few. Secondly, I'll remain the responsibility for developing some of the underpinning joint concepts, such as force-level electronic warfare, integrated air and missile defence. And we'll continue to lead a lot of the joint studies that will underpin a lot of our future capabilities, such as the Intelligence Mission Data Study, Joint Force Cyber, and also the Electronic Warfare Operational Support capabilities. I've also inherited joint test and evaluation, and for setting the test and evaluation doctrine across the department. And finally, it'll be my division that exercises the C4ISR Design Authority on behalf of the Vice Chief. So in conclusion, I think that when you look at the combination of the resourcing of the future force that's in the white paper and the IIP, coupled with the reforms of the FPR, which we've started to enact now, I think that we are pretty well set up to deliver a much more integrated and potent future force. Thank you.
General Campbell thought it might be interesting to have a Commander of Operational Forces offer his perspective on this topic. In case you're wondering, just underneath me there's a hatch, and there's a cable that runs to General Fruin, and if I get off the reservation he pushes the button. My view of the white paper is that provided what is promised is delivered, then we have all the tools to succeed. The challenge for us in uniform is how we implement these things, how we take these opportunities, integrate them and act on them as a team and realise their full potential. The battlefield is a harsh mistress. Things either do or they don't work. They connect or they don't connect. Forces either trust or they don't trust each other. The biggest factor that has driven us together in the last 12 years of operational service has been a realisation that on the battlefield the colour of our uniform fades when we're working alongside each other as a single combat team. That experience, that togetherness that has flown all the way back here and into Canberra and the National Industrial Base has changed the mindset of how we work together and why we want to work together. My forces in special operations are unambiguously joint, interagency, whole of mission forces, national forces. We can't succeed unless we work as a team. I can't deliver the missions unless we're joint, we're integrated and we're supported. I look at what was written in the white paper and what is being promised, and I see opportunity to improve, to be better, to be a team of teams. Now, my command in the last 12 years has seen quite a bit of action. Thousands of combat missions, almost half of the combat deaths. 13% of my deployed force sustained physical combat injuries. These things matter to us. There is nothing more empowering to a person that happens to wear an army uniform than to know overhead that I have a potent Air Force that is available and works and does what it says. Or over the horizon, to have a potent Navy as a force projection platform for joint fires and for combat search and rescue if something goes wrong. That's the sort of force that we're building, and that is the sort of force that sits behind what we see in the white paper. And it shouldn't be lost on you that while I wear an army uniform, and while my command is primarily made up of people who wear green, special operations is a joint force and a national force and a manifestation of the positives of what jointness can do and how it can operate. And it's probably not unrealistic for me to say that we've achieved a pretty high standard. Now, to dwell on some army things, I would offer from my chief that the most potent component and his highest priority to help enable improved joint capability in the land force is Land 200, where we digitalise and network ourselves. It's not some computer or technology initiative, it's how we connect and realise the value of all of the capabilities together. Because that's how we fight. That's how we're fighting now. I have forces deployed in many locations as we speak. Some you know about, many you do not. They all depend on joint and interagency connectivity to work. Land 200, more than anything, is a roadmap for Army to realise its joint potential and to be part of the team of teams that CDF is trying to build for the future challenges. The other key element that the Chief would like me to raise here is his second capability priority, which receives recognition through the White Paper, and that is the replacement of our armoured vehicles, which have now got quite old and are reaching their life of type. And in order to be effective for the challenges of the future and to give our people on the ground some advantage in the face of increasingly capable adversaries, we're looking forward to receiving new platforms that are networked with the Joint Force, that are our land equivalent of the JSF. Now, it was a long time ago that one of our most celebrated generals, Monash, in World War I, combined the sum of the parts on the ground there in France to form a combined arms team. And through that team, they managed to achieve on the ground something that until then had been very rare on that battlefield. And that is a decisive effect on the ground that achieved breakthrough in a stalemate that had lasted for several years. For Army, that historic combined arms team approach, the contemporary equivalent is the Joint Force. And the potential of it is well beyond anything that Monash and those commanders of the past realised. So Army's excited about this white paper. Army's actually more excited about the joint team that's being formed, how our exercises are operating, and how the new platforms, capabilities and relationships that are emerging from this are making us more able on the battlefield, lowering the risks and increasing our capability. And I'm pretty proud to see that in action in support of my forces on the battlefields right now. Thank you.
If I may ask the first question, when you look forward over the next 10 years, we're probably going to see, obviously, advances in technology in the areas that we've talked about that are relevant to joint warfare, C4ISR, electronic warfare, space, cyberspace, as well as the more traditional operational domains. We're going to see more capable adversaries that are aware and attuned to our advantages and therefore will be seeking to undermine those advantages as rapidly and as effectively as they can. And we'll see more complex environments, operational environments that we'll be operating in terms of traditional domains, but also more complex environments such as the urban environment. Where is the potential, do you think, looking forward 10 years, for risks to emerge and for things to go wrong in the joint enterprise? And how do we mitigate those risks and avoid falling into potential disastrous traps? If you could throw that open to the entire panel.
Okay, Jonathan looked at me, so I guess I have to answer that. I would say if we don't keep a very close eye on network security, and that obviously comes down to the cyber and the ability of the enemy to degrade those networks, because that's where we're increasingly going. We increasingly need to apply more attention to it and understand how they will be degraded and how we can operate in a degraded environment. If we don't get on top of that, if we don't keep abreast of it, that's why we need DSTG. Our scientists are very important, industry to inform us also of advancements in those areas. If we're not alive to that, I'm confident we will be with the joint area set up, because that's a part of their job, to keep looking for those threats, that we can keep ahead of it, but it will require consistent attention.
Okay.
Malcolm, much has been made at this forum and everywhere around in the media commentary about continuous naval shipbuilding and drumbeats and replacing a ship every 30 years. And we need to understand that that may be fine for a hull, but with the aspects that you raise, particularly with the ICT and cyber, the refresh rate of 30 years would clearly not work. I mean, if you look back 30 years now for the computing network. So what we are grappling with right now, and is a real challenge, is what refresh rates do we do on these technologies that you're talking about, that we can maintain a level of superiority, and how do we do that as a collective? And it clearly won't be a 30-year drumbeat. It may be a 24-month drumbeat. And I think this is one of the challenges that we will need to sort out.
So when I look at the future environment, one of the things that we're going to have to be very adept at in the Joint Force is manoeuvring in the electronic battle space, understanding what the battle space is, the electronic battle space, noting that the EM environment is becoming more congested, even with civilian applications. But certainly in the environment where our use of the EM spectrum is being challenged by adversaries, we need to become very adept in that area. There are significant investments in new electronic warfare aircraft in the white paper, growlers and other things, but the challenge will be pulling all of those things together and integrating that for the Joint Force. We need to look at our current dependence on space and look at all of the other mediums that we can communicate in, and in some cases regain some of our old skills we used to have in some of those domains, whether it be HF, etc. And we also need to look, as Jonathan said, to industry, looking at what we can get out of inter-radar communications. We can really leverage off some of the really smart ideas that some of our defence scientists have got. So the challenges that I see are in how we keep that force, how we get the an outcome greater than the sum of the parts. The way we do that is by integrating the force, and we've got to make sure it remains integrated even when our integration is being challenged by an adversary.
Yeah.
I've learnt one thing in 36 years of service. It is that our record of picking what's going to happen next isn't that good. I see a couple of areas that germane to your question. The first of them is we need to be careful that we don't focus too much on building an exquisite force for an imagined scenario that may not turn out the way we expected. And that robustness, agility, the ability to adapt rapidly and to build a force that is in climber's reach of a range of different scenarios has got to remain at the core of what we're trying to do. Secondly, in a networked, integrated joint force, the thing to worry about is not our strengths, it's our weaknesses, the weak links. In such a complex and sustained undertaking into the future, there are many, many moving parts that have to be sequenced over time, and the things that will bring us undone are not synchronising and coordinating across the range of factors. The art here is how to implement this and pull it all together effectively so that those weak links don't become fundamental structural failures as we attempt to move forward. We don't desynchronise ourselves. So a key part here is, as has been admirably, pun intended, pointed out here, is how the enterprise, how the department, how all of us pull all these parts together and synchronise it as a whole. And I think in that area, we're learning as we go.
Okay, thank you. Right, floor's open for questions. Anyone? Andrew. Can wait for the mic.
Andrew Davies from ASPI. Thank you for the presentations, gentlemen. Question for you, though. Jointery is a fine thing, but it's not free. And the jointer you want to be, the more joined up, especially at the higher end of capabilities, the more it costs. So how do you decide what level of jointery is enough, where the extra dollar spent gives you the commensurate benefit? And when do you decide that you'd actually rather go and spend that dollar on something else?
I'll kick off. The way I look at it, I think we need to be very pragmatic about how our joint force comes together. Many things about our joint force are set by the acquisition decisions we make. The Joint Strike Fighter comes with ways of joining up with the rest of the joint force. So does the Romeo helicopter and likely the Land 400 vehicles. We're probably not going to be in the game of looking at replacing the way those particular platforms communicate. So when I look at how we integrate the joint force, I look at what are our opportunities within the joint force where we can get the best bang out of our buck. I think some of the work that's been done in the single service programs, like Jericho, is an excellent example. Warren mentioned the air-land integration exercise that happened a couple of weeks ago down at Puckapunyal. That was a fantastic demonstration of how you can leverage persistent air platforms to get a much greater level of connectivity amongst your force from systems which previously couldn't communicate with each other. So I don't necessarily think that all ways of connecting up your joint force are necessarily overly expensive, but we have to be very sensible about how we do build that integration, and we need to be looking for pragmatic solutions based on, you know, a lot of our platforms we're essentially buying either FMS or even the ships that we buy, large components of those ships will likely be FMS, like communication systems.
Yes.
Joinery certainly is not free, but there are 2 points that I think are worth noting in the background. The first of them is that the substantial national investment in the capabilities of the Defence Force today, and as forecast by the White Paper, will be poor unless the potential of those technologies is realised through jointery. The bang for the buck here is in interoperability and jointery, right? Far greater than the sum of the parts. Unless we invest in that bit, we will be significantly under-realising the capability, potential and utility of the force that is evolving. The second observation I would make as a special operator is we often don't give appropriate value to the joint dividend we receive from Alliance. Many of the platforms we have are sourced from Alliance or coalition partners, and the dividends we receive by sharing their doctrines, participating in the training, and the inherent construct of the systems themselves have delivered to us a level of embedded jointery, an approach that, quite frankly, I believe this nation could otherwise never afford. And sometimes I think it's worthwhile acknowledging that more prominently, because I've been in the receipt of that, and quite frankly, it's amazing. Thank you.
I did have one more question from the floor, but I believe I've just been told we're out of time. So, Jim, if you can ask your question in private, that'd be great. I'd like everyone to thank our speakers. That was an excellent session. Thank you very much.